Hello YouTube world, my name is Nicholas Montez and you're watching my YouTube channel, Nicholas Montez. Welcome back to another YouTube channel video everybody. I'm so excited to have you all back here together again. And in today's video we'll be discussing another MCU ranking. Now, as I'm doing these MCU little things, I'm not really doing rankings. I'm mostly just doing lists. I mean, I have ranked the origin stories in the MCU and I have my top 5 favorite comic book references in the MCU. But now let's talk about phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How did this universe begin? What is so like this phase on paper, all these movies sound like great movies because they're based off of the comics and you're introducing these characters. But when you kind of watch them, some of them are really good, but then some of them are just not really good. But with that said, let's get started talking about all 6 movies of Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, so I watched the MCU films leading up to Captain Marvel, like all of them, because, you know, I watched Avengers Infinity War, and then because like the MCU films that I remember watching were the Avengers, Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. And probably a little bit of Ant-Man too. But, Captain Marvel was the next film in that franchise, so I wanted to kind of like watch all of the movies to kind of get prepared for it, and this was probably one of my most anticipated films of this series because there was just one reason. I wanted to see War Machine on the big screen. I wanted to see War Machine in this film because he just looks so cool with all the war weapons and stuff like that, but he's not really good in this movie, and this movie isn't even good at all. And what makes this film so bad is that it just has so much going on. It has so many plot lines, is that when you get to the end of it, you're not really sure what Iron Man and War Machine are trying to defeat. What theme are we learning? Like, it doesn't make the third act is cool when they're fighting the drones and stuff, and Black Widow fights all the hammer guards. You don't know what they're trying to defeat and what they're trying to stop. So, granted, they have some interesting ideas with Tony Stark creating like the future of tomorrow or something like that. That kind of leads back into Avengers Endgame, and there are some interesting stuff with Tony, you know, trying to cure himself from not dying. But so I'm not saying all these stories were bad, but it's like they don't come well together in the end, and none of them really are successful in the end. So, and also the villains are just forgettable. Whiplash and Justin Hammer. Justin Hammer's just a ripoff of Tony Stark, and then Whiplash, I would say he's probably a little bit of the better villain because he has like a little bit of a backstory with him and his father and Tony Stark's father. But once he puts on the suit, it basically feels like the first film, except he has whips, and that's it. So, and then of course War Machine is not even greatly used in this film. Granted, Don Cheadle plays a pretty good role, but like he literally gets the Mark 1 suit to literally beat Tony's butt because he's being like insecure and being drunk. So the story is bad. The characters are pretty bad. it has some interesting ideas, but they're not executed well. So mostly everything in this film is bad, but here's two things before we get into number 5. First off, this movie, probably the best thing about this movie is, of course, the action, and that it gives you more Iron Man, so that's a plus. And it also gives you the introduction of Black Widow into the film, which, can't wait to see her movie next month. But also, the reason why this movie is kind of bad for some people is because Jon Favreau, the director of this film, as well as the director of the first movie, Marvel Studios gave him 2 years, but Jon Favreau actually wanted 3 years. So when you watch this movie, you can't really blame Jon Favreau. But if you're gonna rank Jon Favreau's movies, it's easily one of his weakest films. So that's all I gotta say. Now, Thor, I think that this movie has some interesting ideas when it's going with Asgard. When they tell the backstory of the war between the Asgardians and the Frost Giants, I think it's actually pretty cool. It has that sort of mythical elements that you want from it, and Thor, he feels insecure that he should be like his father, and he wants to slay the Frost Giants just like his father did. And I mean, it's a cool arc the way they do that. I really like that. But the story kind of shifts because, first off, literally when Thor goes down to Earth, it kind of ruins the whole movie for me. Because I mean, it makes sense that Thor got banished because he disobeyed his father to not go to the Frost Giants, because, as you can see, he caused one of his friends to get hurt. He caused Fandral to get hurt, and I mean, it makes sense of why he had to banish him. But when he goes to Earth, right, he creates this love relationship with Jane Foster, and you don't really feel anything, because like they literally just start dating, like becoming like boyfriend and girlfriend like in a weekend, and that is just not very good. And then when you get to the third act, there's not really any emotional tension because you know Thor is stronger than Loki. And then the Frost Giants aren't even a big part of the film. They're just like a side story. They're just a story for the beginning of the film, and they're not even used as much. So it kind of ruins some stuff when you go to Earth, and then Loki becomes king. And then he teams up with the Frost Giants, and then you can kind of see Loki has some heart when he protects Odin from Laufey killing him. But I don't know. This movie is kind of mixed for me, but I still do enjoy it. It has a lot of cool action sequences, so great cast, great characters, but it's just mixed for me when he goes to Earth and then Loki becomes king. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on Thor. Now, The Incredible Hulk, I actually do like. It's not a great movie, but it is an enjoyable film. For me, the Hulk action in this film is really nicely well done. Whether talking about the first one where Hulk where the soldiers are finding him at night and it feels like a horror film at times, or whether talking about the one where it's in broad daylight and he's ripping guns off of tanks and throwing them, and it's so cool because you get to see all these cool explosions in daylight. And then the third act with him fighting Abomination is just great, where he uses a car as boxing gloves. He uses chains to cut him. He rips off spines and stabs him with it. It's just brutal. Kind of reminds me of King Kong fights a little bit when he's fighting those dinosaurs in Kong Skull Island or King Kong 2005. And also it kind of has a pretty cool arc with Thunderbolt Ross, where you kind of have that little arc with him where he wants to stop what he created. Because if you don't know, Hulk and Captain America in the MCU, they're kind of similar in ways, because Thunderbolt Ross, when Bruce Banner got the gammas, when he got the gamma stuff inside of him, Thunderbolt Ross was trying to recreate the super soldier serum that turned Steve Rogers into Captain America. He was trying to recreate that so that way we could have more soldiers, because, you know, everybody thought that Captain America was dead. So they needed a new hero to go to help stop everybody. So Bruce Banner decided to do that, and so I guess the gamma did not work very well, and it worked, but it wasn't the way they thought it would. So he all these years he's been trying to stop the monster that he created, and it's kind of cool the way they explored that in this movie. So Thunderbolt Ross is a really cool arc in this film. Edward Norton plays a pretty good Hulk. I think as the scientist guy, he plays a good role, but as the Hulk, he looks just kind of dark and stuff. And there are some pretty other good performances. Tim Roth as Abomination, pretty good, but, you know, it doesn't do, like, bad. It doesn't do anything really bad with the performances. It has a good story, it has some good characters, it has some good arcs, it has some good action. It could use a little bit more humor in the mix, but other than that, I still really enjoy this movie, and I could rewatch this all day. Now, Captain America the First Avenger, every time I watch this movie, one of the things that I enjoy about this film is the origin story of Captain America. The way they explore it is just so well done, where he's just this kid that he doesn't like bullies, and he'll do whatever it takes to fight. Even if he's not one of those strong men we see on TV, he's still gonna fight. He could do this all day. And even when he gets the super soldier serum, he's still gonna do it because, it's not because he can fight now, it's just because he's still gonna do it, because even though people are stronger than him, he's still gonna fight. He's still gonna do it all day. And just his origin story was just so well done. Along the same lines, the action in the movie is just so well done. Some of the special effects I actually thought were pretty well done, especially when, like, explosions happened. They just looked so comic booky. If you saw my top 5 comic book references in the MCU, you'll know what I'm talking about. But, I also thought that some of the other characters, like his relationship with Peggy Carter, and then Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, some of the Tommy Lee Jones as, like, this war general, like, that's really cool. So I thought that there was a lot of good stuff in the movie. Red Skull, Hugo Weaving plays a pretty good role, but his specific character is not the best. When you get to Infinity War and you see Red Skull in Infinity War, I think that's kind of good, because you get to see where Red Skull's been all these years and how he actually connects with another Infinity Stone, because he can't connect with the Tesseract forever. So I thought that was actually a creative way to do Red Skull in Infinity War and kind of bring all these characters together. But just in general, this film is good, but it's not great. But it is a good setup for Captain America in future films. Now, obviously, everybody loves the Avengers. I personally love it too. On the positives, there's just the interactions between all these characters, all 5 of these movies, building up to this big, massive film. I think it does a fantastic job at that. And that's what the MCU has done perfectly today, as balancing all these characters together in one film. And it doesn't feel too cluttered. And when you think about other films like Into the Spider-Verse or Spider-Man Far From Home, oh no, not Spider-Man Far From Home, Amazing Spider-Man 2, those films did not handle characters being in one film together. But this was the film that kind of handled that well, and I think it did a successful job. The action was on the edge of your seat. The CGI is absolutely phenomenal. Like, whenever explosions happened, it looked so real and so convincing. It looks so expensive, like an expensive product. So I love the way the movie looks, the action, the characters, and I also love the score. I just love mostly everything about this film. But I do have some issues with the film, though. On one hand, there's just some kind of forgettable scenes in the movie. Where they're talking about, like, the scene with Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. in the Tesseract. I just didn't think the scene was very interesting. Loki doesn't really have... Granted, he has an arc with Thor, but he doesn't have a specific... Like, when he's in the Battle of New York, he's not really doing anything. Troy fights Thor, and he gets smashed... But then he gets smashed by the Hulk. And it's like... That's not really something to, like... Especially when you're doing a character that is loved by bunches of people. People love him because he's so mischievous and funny, and of course he's Tom Hiddleston, so he has to be like that. But his specific role in the movie just, now when you go into the TV show Loki, which is a show about this version of Loki, about the 2012 version of Loki, I think you kind of explore him a little bit more. So I think you make the character of Loki in that film a little bit more better. And then also Captain America's costume just is not that well done. And also not just that, but Captain America, Hawkeye, and Black Widow, I don't think any of them really worked in this movie. Besides Black Widow having that fantastic scene where Black Widow is fighting those guys in the chair, her whole performance in this movie was just not that good. Captain America, as this was the first movie seeing him come out of the ice after 70 years, they don't really explore it. Sure, he's trying to get used to the real world. They actually have a deleted scene of him doing that, but they don't really show that in this movie. They just show him beating up a punching bag, and him having flashbacks of the war. And that's not really something to do with this type of character. And then, of course, Hawkeye doesn't have the greatest character arc, but because he basically gets hypnotized by Loki most of the time in the film, but then he becomes the hero by fighting with the Avengers, and then but the big standout characters here are Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk, because Hulk has some of the best moments. Thor is really good at fighting and has some of the best moments with Hulk, and then Iron Man, obviously he's funny, he does everything he can in this film that he did in the first two films of Iron Man, and he does a great job here. And of course he has that arc going into other films in the MCU that is just phenomenal. So this is a great film, but it has some issues though. Okay, so the reason why this film for me is a number 1 on my list is because I think that this movie is pretty much perfect. As this was the film that introduced us to this character as well as this universe, it really did such a great job of doing that. But like most people would say, this is a little bit more of the grounded films in the MCU because it's the first one. And so they can't focus on they can't focus on a lot of big things because it's the first film, so you want to make it a little bit more smaller paced. But beyond that, the character of Tony Stark is just so phenomenal, as you get to see his arc throughout the entire MCU films, and especially his arc, his introduction to this film, is just phenomenal. He's just so charismatic, so charming, so great at everything. He has great interactions with everybody, kind of like James Bond. Except he's different from James Bond. But he also just has some great fight scenes with fighting the 10 rings and stuff like that. He's just so funny, and when he's creating suits, he has so many great lines. And Jon Favreau knows how to capture comedy when he does the comedy at the right time, and it's perfectly well done with the comedy stuff. So, and then of course, some of the action. I know that this movie's kind of weak on action, but the movie does have some pretty good action when it happens. Granted, the third act with Ironmonger can feel a bit forgettable when you're just fighting a villain with the same abilities, except a much bigger suit. It's kind of predictable and forgettable, but I think the action in the third act is kind of cool. It has some stakes when Ironmonger is beating up all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and he's literally almost killing Tony Stark to death. But anyways, I love this movie. All the characters are great. Pepper Potts is funny. It also kind of has that superhero template of the love story between Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. So I kind of like that as well. But we don't really, but because this is the first movie, we don't really get that until like in later films. Probably like in Iron Man 2 or something. But that's why Iron Man is my #1 favorite MCU film of Phase 1. So that's my ranking of all 6 films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Phase 1. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My Instagram is Marvel6 and my TikTok name is Marvel1Fan. If you guys don't understand those names, head to my back section to follow me on all social medias. I'm also on Letterboxd. It's Sydney is my Instagram. Marvel_6_, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.